Welcome, everyone. See a few people logged in so far. We're just going to wait and we'll start this right at 12 o'clock. While we're waiting, if you wouldn't mind putting in what local section you're calling in from, it'd be great to know. Welcome, Sarbs. Welcome, Santa Clara, Tri-Counties. Great to see you all. Northern San Joaquin. Good, Sierra section. Welcome, welcome. So I will go ahead and get started. It's 12 o'clock. Welcome to the local section annual treasurer orientation. Today, we will be hearing from our current treasurer, Sean Neskis, and our incoming treasurer, Brian Villacorta, as well as our CWA staff accountant, Chris Consento. And before we get started, I want to just go over some of the Zoom controls. We will be taking questions today, and there are a couple different ways you can ask questions. If you'd like to speak, you can raise your hand by clicking on the raise hand button, and I will go ahead and unmute you so that you will be able to speak out loud. If you don't have that option, you can enter your question into the Q&A box. Just click on that and a box will open and you can type in the question there, and we'll either answer that live or one of the panelists will be able to type their reply. If at all you are ever having any technical issues, let us know through the chat feature and we'll try and figure those out for you. So I think we can go ahead and get started.
Okay, thank you, Megan. Good morning, everyone. This is Sean Neskis. I am the current treasurer for the CWA board. Today is a day that's important for local section treasurers or members of the local section that possibly may be taking over the treasurer role, as some local sections still pick their appointees for the positions. During today's webinar, we're here for roughly an hour to answer questions and present important information to you. We're going to be discussing the local section financial policies and procedures. We're going to be talking about leadership role within the local section, as well as reporting requirements that are very important for the local section to be doing for the CWA staff. Budget and monthly reporting template that Brian will be going over. We'll briefly go over the audit, IRS, and California state standards, as well as what CWA office support can do for your local section. Megan, if you please. Your local section members on your panel, on your board, play an important role in getting information to CWA, as well as sharing information with the board. The board, as well as the operations committee, looks at the financial reports monthly to see what's going on, pays attention to how the money is being brought in or spent, and then talking about the fiduciary responsibilities supporting CWA's board. Megan, if you please. So I'm going to go over the Financial Policy 104. It's been updated and I'm going to go over that. But first, I'm going to ask Megan to walk us through this. And I want to share that this, I think Megan did, but this is being recorded. But it's important to kind of see this now as we're discussing it and walking through. So if you have questions, we can focus on those questions as we're going through, because they will be recorded, but we just want to make sure everybody's seeing what we're presenting today.
Great, thanks, John. So yes, this is how you'll get to that leader webpage on our cwea.org site. So first you'll go to cwea.org, and in the navigation menu up at the top, there will be drop-down menus. If you hover over the About name, you can you'll see a drop-down menu that shows Leader Resources. So just go to Leader Resources, and this is a big page with a lot of important information, and we'll also be posting the webinar link here too later. So then you'll go to CWA Policies, and then you'll find Local Section Finances right there.
Thank you, Megan.
I'll also put in a short link, a quick link for you. I'll stick that in the chat. You can save the page for you.
This information will also be sent to each local section after the presentation today. If you go to the next slide, thank you. So Financial Policy 104 covers a lot of information. It's 12 pages long. And there is a part in the policy that talks about local section board, and it talks about certain points within the policy that are kind of briefly described here. So bank accounts. CWA focus with local sections to only have one bank account per section. This helps reduce possible confusion with multiple bank accounts within the local section, and it makes reporting much easier. So the education director has worked on this for a while now to phase out some of the local sections who've had multiple accounts, and right now it's pretty good, and one account per section. Online access, again, we want to look at the online access to assist the local section treasurer or a board member to see the what's going on, being able to access up-to-date information within your account. And this also allows CWA to have access to go in there and see what's going on. So if there's any communication, you both can be looking at the same documents and understanding what's being shared. There are debit cards that can be received if necessary. And those are, debit cards are, excuse me while I get to my page here. Again, when you're looking at migrating bank accounts into an institution, again, you need to have the educational director will help assist with that. And then there's limit of one debit card per local section. So the debit cards are available, but again, they're not, there's only one per section that's amongst the local section panel. And then merchant accounts. This helps make payments easy. And it's all spelled out in the policy for more details. Next slide, Megan, please.
Sean, can I just clarify one thing on the previous slide?
Yes.
So for any help with bank accounts, debit cards, or merchant accounts, it would actually be Chris that local sections would reach out to. And he will be able to help you with any of that information. So it would be our staff accountant, Chris. Thanks.
Okay. AP checks, again, it's for $500 or more. And one thing to keep in mind that these require a 2-signature to receive the funds. Justification. We always want to follow the mission statement that CWA has developed. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through this. And we want to look at that to make sure that what CWA is doing under the 501(c) is followed in our mission. A big part of this in the financial side, as well as the treasurer role, is documentation. We all know receiving receipts for payments is important to have those receipts, but they need to be the detailed receipts. We need the receipts that show itemized list of items that were purchased, so that we can detail those and document, and making sure that they're legible and understandable, so that if we're questioned on them, we can always follow up with it. So it's not just the receipt that gives the final total at the end, it's an itemized receipt. And sometimes it may require, or may mean you have two receipts for the same purchase. Validation. This is another very important part of the financial policy. It needs to identify the attendees that are participating in your function, as well as the recipients, if there are people that are receiving items, and all those need to be documented with the name, their agency, so that we have it captured, again, for when we get audited and turned in. Excuse me. Next slide. So overall, if you take a look at the policy, as I mentioned, it's 12 pages long. There's certain parts in there that focus on what the board does with the policy, but then there's a section for the local section areas. But this is what it kind of covers. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Reduces the risk for volunteers. So what the policy tries to do is, as a volunteer, we want to take the risk away from you and kind of help out and get things straightened out. Sorry about that. So again, you're a volunteer to the local section, and CWA is here to help in any way they can for this, and to make sure that it works for the local section as well as CWA. The policy also improves the ability to meet the fiduciary responsibility. It's important for us to turn our paperwork on time, for the auditors to review the paperwork, and if we're working together, it'll help us meet that responsibility. Again, there's 17 local sections plus the headquarter, for the reporting. So, making sure that the reporting is consistent is important, as well as understanding that it meets the IRS and the California regulations for a nonprofit, which CWA is. And then in the end of the year, of course, preparing the financial year and audit reports through the CWA office. So if you're keeping a CWA office updated on your monthly reports, making sure you have your receipts, everything should work just fine. Megan, if you would please. Other parts of the financial is that, again, providing copies of all signed contracts. If you're going into an agreement for an event, maybe it's a location that you're reserving, those contracts need to be signed. Those contracts also need to be provided to CWA when turning in your paperwork. List of assets. Some local sections have purchased laptops or projectors for presentations in the past. Those things need to be listed out so that they can be accounted for, where the money was spent, and if there's possible depreciation for those items. And then again, a maximum of 2 local section signatures or signees, so that there's always a backup, so that you're not, as treasurer, the only one that's signing for the anything that requires a signature. There's always 2 signatures required. And then in the end, if you're doing any training and you have trainers that are, I believe, being paid, then the 1099 recipients for those people. There might be some other parts that the 1099 recipients are needed, but again, those need to be documented so the CWA office can send a 1099 to those recipients who provided services or trainings. Megan? Related party activities. So I'm going to read this to you. It's while section members may be paid by the organization or as a result of work for the organization, we would like to continue to encourage the best practice, proactive disclosure and independent prior approval by the board for any related party transactions as a protection of members and officers, which provides certain protections to all parties. So I know it's a lot said, but again, we're always looking to protect the members as well as the officers when dealing with financial responsibilities. And then the second part is the CWA board members and affiliated companies. Payments to CWA corporation board members are not allowed from any financial account under CWA's tax ID unless disclosed and approved by the CWA board. So again, we want to exercise caution if you're asking a board member to do a presentation. This is something that needs to be volunteered and not paid for. And the last portion of that is donations, and it talks about the CWA mission. So I'd like to go to the next slide and look at that mission first. The mission statement reads, empowering, educating, and connecting water professionals to protect public health and the environment. So this is the CWA's mission. And matter of fact, this is a new mission that was developed 6 months ago, maybe a little longer than that, if I remember right. But when you talk about donations, it's important to understand that the donation needs to fit with the statement. Mission statement is for CWA. Donations can be made to other nonprofits whose mission complements ours. So keep in mind, something like Water for People has several focuses that match what CWA is trying to accomplish. And so a donation to them would be fine. But something like a food bank would not be, because it's not really related to the mission of CWA. So if you have questions on that, it's best to reach out to somebody with CWA to find out if you're looking to make a donation, if it fits under the mission statement and would be acceptable. Okay, thank you. Understanding that the financial reporting is important. There's a lot of protections as well as requirements. And the protections are the reporting will help protect you as treasurer. So Brian is going to go through the reporting portion of it. And again, if you're documenting everything and following what the bank statements show, it's going to protect you. It also protects the other volunteers within your local section, making sure that they understand if you have others that are helping you, making sure they understand that there are some rules and regulations they need to be following. And then in the end part, it protects CWA Board of Directors. If the local sections are reporting on what's going on, providing the right documentation, doing their reports, and the board is looking over, it fits us. It'll protect the CWA Board of Directors. These reports are required by the auditors. They would like to see this. They want to make sure that it's being turned in along with your receipts. This is required for CWA to file their taxes. It's understood that the 17 chapters need to be presenting this information. And then it also is required to keep the standing of a nonprofit, the 501(c)(3). So for CWA to continue with their status, this is required to keep that status in good standing. I'll take any questions if there are any at this time. I don't see any, Megan.
Annie, if you have a question, you can, oh, I have one question. I'm going to allow Norman Woods to talk. Okay.
Hello, I just wanted to make sure that we are going to get a printed copy of all this because we kind of went through that and I'm multitasking, but I wanted to make sure that I got that list and everything like that of this whole presentation.
So Norman, thank you for asking the question. Yes, at the end of this presentation, Chris has a list of local section members that will receive this policy, a copy of this policy, and the recording will be available.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
There is another question. Are the lists of assets due every year, if the same?
Yes. Even though your assets may not change or you may not added any assets, it is due each year.
I don't see any more questions.
Okay.
Okay, Sean, I think I'll jump in here. If you can hear me okay, Megan, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My name is Brian Villacorta. As Sean introduced me earlier, I'm going to be the incoming treasurer at the state level CWEA for the years 2022 to 2023. So it's my pleasure to be here today with you guys, and what I'm going to be covering on this webinar are two aspects. One of them is related to budgeting and the tools available to accomplish and meet the requirements of your budgets. And the second will be related to bookkeeping. So for all those multitaskers that have this presentation in the background, this is probably the part of the presentation you might want to perk up and listen to, because you will get all this information, but I'm trying to step through it and simplify it as best as I can. So it will be a very streamlined process for all the local section treasurers that are going to be putting together this information. Recognizing that the local section treasurers may consist of folks that have done this maybe at least one term already, maybe a couple terms, but we also likely have new local section treasurers that are joining the slate of the board at the local section. So what CWEA has done is put together this 6-step strategy of sorts on how to help guide local section treasurers in putting together their budgets. We want to make sure that as you're putting your program of work together, that you incorporate activities that are going to include all members and that they'd be served equally. You want to make sure that any of those investments into those programs are directly benefiting your membership and that it follows in alignment with CWEA's mission. So I think that's worth repeating. Sean showed that a couple slides ago, but I jotted that down: empowering, educating, and connecting water professionals to protect public health and the environment. So like Sean said, that is a newer verbiage to the mission statement. And we ask that you kind of keep that in the, not really in the background, but in the foreground as you're looking to put your activities together for your calendar year. When it comes to your banking account records and the balances that you keep, we are suggesting that you work towards maintaining a checking account balance of 50% of your annual budget. So what we want to try to avoid is to have checking accounts where the balances kind of keep growing, but there's no expenses made. And that's kind of seen as a red flag when we kind of have the audits reviewed. And so we want to make sure that as revenues coming in, that we have those also expenses going out for those programs, and to maintain that threshold of about 50% of your annual budget. As you're developing the budget, we ask that you also look at prioritizing those activities that focus on education, networking, and membership support. And with any sort of budget, it's always important to have a plan together. So working with your local section board, work to put a plan and strategy where you'll get the greatest benefit from the activities passed down to your membership. Finally, be purposeful in your spending. Again, we've talked about being in alignment with the mission. We talk about giving back to membership. So we want to make sure that your plans and your workflow keeps these 6 steps in mind. Next slide, please. So this is an example of the reporting template that's made available by CWEA. You will be receiving this template in an email from Chris Consunto here this afternoon or by tomorrow. Some of you have seen this template before. It's an Excel spreadsheet, and essentially it's part of the toolkit that CWEA has to help standardize and streamline the reporting process by all local sections. Worth noting is the deadline of April 30th, 2022, where we're going to require your overall budget to be submitted. When you receive this Excel spreadsheet, you'll see that there's a tab in there that's labeled main budget document. And this is the one that we're going to ask that you update and send over to us by this April 30th deadline. Next slide, please. As you explore, open up the spreadsheet, you'll see that the file consists of multiple tabs, but they all follow the same format. The cells are all cell protected, so there's no worry about having an inadvertent keystroke flip or something that changes the calculation. None of that is allowed to happen. But what you'll see is that there are already pre-populated cells. So on the rows, you have categories for revenue and expenses. And then on the columns, you have categories for programs. So all of these are already pre-published on the spreadsheet, and we're asking each local section to complete data entry on a month-to-month basis. Next slide, please. So starting with the fiscal year, which starts in July, we're going to ask you to begin with your checking account opening balance, and that will be put into this highlighted box that says check beginning balance, checking account beginning balance. From there, you're going to use your bank statement to put in the revenue inputs for deposits and or membership payments from your events. Those will be entered into each of the cells in the respective category. Similarly, you're going to take your expenses, anything that's a bill paid or any expenses to vendors, you're going to put that data into the expense category. When you're done, there should be a final cell that has the ending balance, and that should match what's on your bank statement. If it doesn't match, it's most likely that there is a data entry error, and you should go back and double check your entries to make sure that both of those numbers line up. And I mentioned that will start in July, but there is an associated tab for each month of the fiscal year. And the balance that finishes from the preceding month will then get populated to start the balance in the next month. So in addition to that spreadsheet template, CWA also has these request forms that I think for those existing treasurers, you've seen a version of this before. For the new treasurers, these are the forms that are required when you have an event, and if you either need to have somebody in your committee reimbursed or you have to have a check issued to a vendor, you would put the associated invoice, cancel check, supporting documentation, and attach that with the check request form. Likewise, with the deposit report, when you make bank deposits and you have your deposit slips, we ask that you retain copies of that and attach those with the completed deposit report form sent back over to CWEA. Next slide, please. Okay, this slide is intended to be a reminder that, and Sean alluded to this already, that CWEA is a 501c3 nonprofit entity. So by obtaining that status, we are tax exempt. And that's a great thing for being a nonprofit. But there's also there's a lot more scrutiny involved with how we report our information. The three primary agencies that we do report our financial information to are the Internal Revenue Service, the State of California, and the Attorney General's Office. So these standards that we're trying to implement across the board with the templates are all intended to facilitate the financial reporting that then CWE takes and compiles and puts together. So it's again, it's not so much that at the state level, CWA is just asking for this information. These are requirements from these governing agencies that we have to maintain. And that's why we ask all local sections to maintain uniformity with the reporting that they get back to CWEA. Next slide, please. So to recap the responsibilities, the budget for the fiscal year 22-23, that will be due on April 30th, 2022. So you have about 6 weeks, 6 to 7 weeks to get that together. And I mentioned that CWA will email the local section treasurers the template, so you can start working with that. If there's any questions, you can contact myself, Sean, or Chris at CWEA for assistance. On a monthly basis, the reminders are with the financial reports, with the reporting of the templates, which we previously went through. We ask that any supporting documentation or paperwork that you each keep good copies of that. A good rule of thumb is when you get these receipts or invoices that you scan them and that you have a digital copy. That way there's less likelihood of that paperwork getting lost or ink on a receipt fading over time. So that's part of the documentation package that we ask that you submit. Similarly with the check request forms, keep documentation, and if you have cancel bank checks and so forth, submit those. Sean alluded to an earlier slide about maintaining the list of attendees for meal and entertainment expenses, and then for those prize giveaways, who are the recipients of those. That's important to maintain and to have that list available for CWA. We talked about the deposit receipts and to make sure you include as much detail as possible with those. And then we haven't talked about this yet, but it's also maintaining a register for your petty cash box, your petty cash drawer. That's important also to have an accounting of what's available under petty cash. The last item, bank statement reconciliation. So that's an important step. You get your bank statements, and yes, that shows what deposits were made and what checks have cleared. But the reconciliation for those outstanding checks and deposits is also very important. So we ask all local section treasurers to continue to maintain just what you would do with your normal personal check and keep that reconciliation activity up. Next slide, please. Okay, we will pause here for any questions.
There are a couple questions that came
Let
in.
me think. Are you a lefty or a righty?
Oh, that wasn't one of the questions though. The first one is a local section, or if a local section uses the CWEA financial team to do their accounting, does the local section treasurer need to populate these spreadsheets?
Yes, so the spreadsheets still need to be completed by the local section.
Can I jump in there for a minute?
Yeah, jump in, Renee, please.
Okay, so if CWEA is doing the bookkeeping for the local section, the only part of the template the local section needs to complete is the budget. And then the monthly, so all those, and Brian is going to go over that in the next few slides. So, but the answer to the question is no, they don't have to fill in the monthly, just the budget.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that, Renu. So yes, the budget needs to be submitted, and we will, in the next segment of the webinar, I'll go over the bookkeeping services that then would be handled by CWA staff.
Another question was, when booking events, for example, venues and caterings, is there a reason to disclose that we are 501c3? Are there benefits to mentioning this with the institutions we do business with? Tax breaks or anything else?
Yes. Sometimes there are organizations that will give discounts to 503Cs. Absolutely, it's worth mentioning. Anytime you book anything with any vendor or agents or even agency, it's worth mentioning that, yes.
And another question, since COVID happened, we haven't been spending any money on events, so our bank account is not at 50% expenditures. I'm assuming during the pandemic, this requirement is waived.
So it's actually not a requirement as such. It's more of a guidance. So we don't expect after 2 years of not having events for people to have used their money. Right, Brian? I mean, that's it's just a guidance more than a requirement.
Yeah, that six-step kind of summary was intended as strategies and suggested guidance, but not a requirement. That's correct.
Great, thank you. I don't see any other questions, so we can continue.
Okay, we'll continue on. So this next segment leads into the bookkeeping support services that CWA provides. And this is a program that we are encouraging all local sections to take part of. To date, we have 10 out of our 17 local sections that are participating. And what we found, or how we're showing the benefit here, is that it's reducing a lot of the administrative tasks that normally get placed on the local section treasurer. So seeing that a lot of local section time is comprised of volunteers, and everybody has limited bandwidth, a day job, a family life, etc. To have a additional task taken off the plate at the local section, we're seeing as a big benefit. What we're also seeing is the benefit that it's eliminating reporting compliance issues. So in the years past, we've had some trouble getting reports out of local sections, and the timeliness or the delays have created some impacts at the state level. And so by signing up for the CWA bookkeeping service eliminates that. Next slide, please. So this slide is intended to show the comparison between the route of local sections still doing the bookkeeping service on their own versus what CWA can offer by signing up with their bookkeeping services. And you'll see that in the column that says with bookkeeping service on the left, there are about 8 tasks that will be taken care of. That's, in my view, that's a tremendous service that CWA can offer. And it's one that I would urge all local sections to adopt. Next slide, please. So for those local sections that are still considering, I mentioned we have 10, we still have about 7 local sections that are still doing their own books, and that's okay. But if you do decide that you want to take a part or take advantage of CWA service, it's an opt-in process. You would notify Chris Consento at CWEA, and he would work to make the transition so that the local section duties and the bookkeeping portion of that are now into CWA staff's responsibility. There are 2 other options, though, that are more of a forced-in approach, that they're not options. Where we see a local section is 3 months late on getting reporting in, CWA will step in and put that local section into the bookkeeping service program. We just see that tends to lead to just other issues with timeliness and getting reports in, that by putting them on putting a section into the bookkeeping support system just really simplifies the process. Also, if there's a trend for ongoing tardiness or lateness, that's another telltale sign for us that local section has some struggles with getting the information back out to CWA in a timely fashion. So we would then put that local section to be into the bookkeeping support service program. With that being said, if after a 2-year period, local sections want to get out of that and take back over ownership, then that possibility exists. Again, it's a 2-year period, but there is the option to then go back to having the local section take care of the program. So far, we're seeing that the feedback is very positive, and those sections that are involved are really appreciative of the services being provided. Next slide, please. So I've mentioned already timeliness and delays and getting the information back to us is very important. It goes without saying that the longer it takes for a report to get done, it just gets harder to keep up, and the work just backs up. It's important to remind everybody that the late reports have impacts. There is a ripple effect. When we talk about documentation, there's a greater likelihood that documents will get lost, printing gets faded, and so forth. And so we definitely want to see that the reports are done in a more timely fashion, just so that there's more accuracy with the documentation. When things do fall behind, there's an increase staff load on the volunteers, the staffing, more resources allocated to get caught up, get to the bottom, talk to local sections, and so forth. And so that involvement does have, there's a cost effect impact, there's a time impact, and I think our section would be, our organization would be better served just keeping track of those timelines. And then the last item, the audits, when it does come to audit period, we don't want to be caught behind from a local section not getting the reports in. So that just keeps all the records nice and clean. And that's why we ask all local sections to please stay on top of the deadlines and the timing for getting the reports back to us. Next slide, please. Okay, not sure how many local sections utilize the CWA's association management software, but this is a great tool. If you're trying to understand your membership and the membership needs and the membership wants, they have a software that's available, and it allows your users to know what works in your local section. Think of it like a database that allows for focused marketing. You can then target the members who, for certain topics, that brings in more attendance. And maybe those are trends that local sections want to know. The database gives you those reports to kind of see and pick what's happening when you do plan your events. And then this AMS system allows members or leaders at the local section to stay visible and in touch with membership, really addressing the membership needs. So maybe you see a trend that there's a certain agency where participants are no longer coming. That might be important to your planning events. How do you attract that membership base back to your meetings? And so we're asking local sections to utilize the mycwea.org website, and there's portal for event planning and event registration. And that's a great tool then to utilize to then have a central database of sorts to keep track and log all the registrations that are coming in for your event. Next slide, Megan. Okay, with that, I will turn it back to Sean to close out the webinar. Sean? Sean, I think you might be on mute still.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you to all of you that participated today. I'm hoping that this information is applicable to what you'll be doing as treasurer or as your local section board. Brian hit on a date several times, and I'm going to repeat that. That's April 30th. April 30th is when the budget is due to CWA. And just a reminder that CWA does work on a fiscal calendar year, July 1 through June 30th of the following. And As we move forward, after this presentation, each of the local section representatives will receive multiple documents today. You'll receive the template that Brian had presented to you for the budget, as well as your monthly financing. You'll also receive a copy of the FP 104, the financial policy. And you will also receive the electronic copies of the check and requests, as well as the deposit documents. So those will be coming to you. There were a couple other questions that came up during Brian's presentation, and I want to make sure we answer those. So Megan, would you mind getting those up for us?
Sure. So the question is there a plan to make bookkeeping support mandatory?
Renew or Chris, would one of you like to address that one?
It would be a board decision, a CWA state board decision, and I have not heard that.
Okay.
And then also Brian's email is in the chat. We have Sean's up there twice. Sorry about that.
That's okay. All right.
Any other questions? You can raise your hand to speak or type in your question in the Q&A.
While we're waiting on questions, I'd also like to introduce Brian Mosley. He's a new addition to CWA. He's our education coordinator, and he will also be able to interface with the local sections. I was mentioned about the database software system, and Brian will be an important asset for those local sections looking to utilize the software there.
Okay.
The recording will be posted on YouTube. I'll send a link to I think Chris will send a link to the folks that or along with all of the items that he will be including to all the sections. And then for any sections that missed it or you want to watch again, we'll have that available on that leaders website as well.
All right. I do not see any other questions.
Well, thank you everyone for attending. And like I said, this will be posted up onto the CWA website. If you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to any of us. Thank you, Brian. Thanks, Sean. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Renew.
Thank you, Megan.
Thank you, everyone, for your attention. Have a great
Thank you,
afternoon.
everyone. Thank you, Brian.